Sheriff Mark Dalton stood in the middle of a dusty Texas ranch, holding a citation worth $50,000. Across from him stood 72-year-old farmer Walter Hayes. The old man didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply looked at the sheriff and said, "You should have checked who signed that deed before you came here." The sheriff laughed. 3 days later, he lost his badge, his reputation, and everything he had spent 20 years building. And it all started because he underestimated one old farmer. For more than 40 years, Walter Hayes had lived on the same ranch outside the small town of Red Creek, Texas. Everyone knew him. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He spent most of his days repairing fences, feeding cattle, and watching sunsets from his porch. After his wife passed away, the ranch became his entire world. The townspeople respected him because he was honest and hardworking. But Sheriff Mark Dalton saw things differently. Dalton had recently become the county's most powerful law enforcement official. He loved attention. He loved authority. And he especially enjoyed reminding people that he was in charge. Over time, rumors began spreading that a large commercial development company wanted land near Red Creek. The company planned to build warehouses and distribution centers. The project promised millions of dollars in investment. But there was one problem. Walter's ranch sat directly in the middle of the proposed expansion area. Without his land, the project couldn't move forward. Developers approached Walter several times. Each time, he refused. The ranch wasn't for sale. No amount of money would change his mind. After months of rejection, the pressure started increasing. Soon county inspectors began appearing on the property. Then came complaints. Then came investigations. Then came fines. Walter paid small penalties when necessary, but he knew something wasn't right. Someone wanted him gone. One hot afternoon, 3 county vehicles rolled onto Walter's property. Sheriff Dalton stepped out with several officials. Walter was repairing a gate when they approached. Dalton smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone expecting victory. "Mr. Hayes," Dalton announced loudly. "We've completed our investigation." Walter placed his tools down. And Dalton handed him a thick stack of papers. Environmental violations. Property code violations. Unsafe structures. Walter slowly flipped through the documents. The total amount due sat on the final page. $50,000. Several officials smirked. They expected anger. Instead, Walter calmly folded the papers. Then he asked a single question. "Did you personally verify the ownership records?" Dalton laughed. "I don't need lessons from a farmer." Walter nodded. "That's what I was afraid of." The sheriff walked away feeling victorious. He believed the old man would finally surrender. He had no idea what was coming. That evening, Walter drove into town. Instead of visiting a lawyer, he visited the county archives. A young records clerk named Emily recognized him immediately. When Walter explained the situation, her expression changed. Together they began reviewing property documents. Hours later, Emily discovered something shocking. The land records connected to Walter's ranch contained a special easement agreement dating back nearly 70 years. The document had been signed by the governor of Texas and approved by a federal agricultural commission. The agreement granted the property protected agricultural status. More importantly, it severely limited county authority over the ranch. Many of the violations listed in Dalton's citation couldn't legally be enforced. But there was something even bigger. Attached to the file was a series of letters revealing that the Hayes family had donated thousands of acres to the county decades earlier. In exchange, county officials had guaranteed certain legal protections for future generations. Those protections were still active. And Sheriff Dalton had completely ignored them. Emily quietly contacted a state oversight office. The documents immediately raised concerns. Within 24 hours, investigators arrived. They weren't interested in Walter. They were interested in Sheriff Dalton. As they reviewed county records, disturbing patterns emerged. Walter wasn't the only target. Several elderly landowners had received questionable citations after refusing to sell property connected to the development project. Investigators followed the money. What they found was devastating. Developers had donated large sums to organizations linked to Dalton's political campaign. Several county officials appeared to have coordinated enforcement actions against specific property owners. The evidence kept growing. By the second day, state investigators obtained financial records. The situation became impossible to ignore. On the morning of the third day, Sheriff Dalton arrived at work expecting another normal day. Instead, two state investigators were waiting in his office. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. When Dalton walked out, employees immediately noticed something was wrong. His confidence was gone. His face had turned pale. An emergency press conference was announced that afternoon. Local reporters filled the room. Cameras pointed toward county officials. Then the announcement came. Sheriff Mark Dalton was being suspended pending a corruption investigation. Multiple county employees were placed on administrative leave. Several enforcement actions, including the $50,000 fine issued to Walter Hayes, were officially revoked. Questions from reporters came non-stop. Dalton refused to answer. For the first time in years, he couldn't control the situation. The story spread quickly. Television stations picked it up. Regional newspapers covered every detail. Public outrage exploded. People who had remained silent for years finally spoke out. Former victims came forward. The investigation expanded. A week later, Walter sat on his porch watching the evening sunset. The same porch where he and his wife had spent decades together. A black SUV slowly approached the ranch. Emily stepped out carrying a folder. She smiled. "Thought you'd want to see this." Walter opened the folder. Inside was the official notice canceling every citation. The state had also recommended compensation for legal expenses and damages. Walter chuckled softly. "I never wanted revenge." Emily nodded. "I know. You just wanted them to leave you alone." Walter looked across the fields. The wind moved gently through the grass. For a moment, everything felt peaceful again. Months later, the development project collapsed. Several officials resigned. Investigations continued. As for Sheriff Dalton, the career he spent decades building never recovered. People remembered the man who tried to use power against an old farmer. But they also remembered something else. They remembered Walter Hayes. The quiet farmer who never raised his voice. The man who fought back with truth instead of anger. Because sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest one. Sometimes it's the old farmer who already knows something everyone else has forgotten. And 3 days after Sheriff Dalton handed him a $50,000 fine. The sheriff learned that lesson the hard way.